The morning sun rose gently over the quiet suburbs of Seattle, washing the neat rows of houses in a golden calm. And in one of those houses lived Mark Turner and his wife Lena, a couple who from the outside seemed to have everything. 5 years of marriage, a modest but cozy home, the kind of love that looked steady and safe. Mark was the loyal, hard-working husband everyone admired. The man who left early, came home late, always chasing the next project at the engineering firm to give Lena the comfortable life he believed she deserved. He adored her quietly, with small gestures, a cup of coffee left on the counter, a soft kiss before bed, a bouquet of lilies on Fridays, believing that love was about consistency, not grand speeches. But inside the walls of that warm home, the silence had started to grow like a shadow. Lena, beautiful and gentle, once full of laughter, now found herself spending long afternoons alone, staring through the kitchen window at the empty driveway, feeling the hours stretch endlessly while her husband sat trapped in meetings. She knew Mark loved her, but love that never speaks, never listens, can begin to fade into routine. She missed the spark, the conversation, the feeling of being seen. Her camera gathered dust on the shelf, her dreams of photography long abandoned for laundry and quiet dinners eaten alone. And though she never meant to feel it, loneliness crept in like winter fog, silent, cold, unavoidable. Then one day everything shifted. Mark came home earlier than usual, a rare smile lighting his face as he loosened his tie and said, "You'll never guess who I saw today. David Williams." The name carried history. David, Mark's best friend from college, the confident one, the talker, the one who had left town to build a life of business success and adventure. Lena had heard stories about their wild college years, the way David could make anyone laugh, how Mark once called him the brother I never had. Now, after years away, David had returned to Seattle to expand his company, and Mark was excited like a kid again. "We should invite him over," he said warmly, and Lena smiled, curious, wanting to see the man who once meant so much to her husband. When David walked through their door a week later, he brought with him the energy of the city. Tall, stylish, a glint in his eye that carried charm and confidence. He hugged Mark tightly, clapping him on the back, and then turned to Lena with a grin that seemed to linger a second too long. "So you're the famous Lena," he said smoothly. "Mark always said he married up." Lena laughed shyly, a blush touching her cheeks as she poured wine, and the evening flowed easily. Stories from college, jokes, laughter that filled the quiet house once more. Mark felt happy seeing his old friend again, unaware of the small glances crossing the table, unaware of how attention once rare can awaken something forgotten. Over the next few weeks, David became a familiar presence, dropping by on weekends, joining dinners, bringing gifts, a bottle of red wine, a box of chocolates, for Lena's sweet tooth. He had a way of noticing things Mark overlooked, complimenting her new haircut, asking about her hobbies, making her feel visible again. At first it felt harmless, friendly conversation, shared jokes, but slowly, subtly, the boundaries began to blur. Lena found herself waiting for his messages, smiling at his texts, laughing at things she couldn't share with Mark. She told herself it was nothing, just friendship, yet each message made her heart beat faster. David knew exactly what to say, how to fill the emptiness she tried to hide. When Mark came home exhausted, distracted, thinking of work deadlines, she no longer tried to talk. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying David's words. "You deserve someone who really sees you." The secret chats began innocently, photos of sunsets, small talk, late-night jokes, but soon turned into confessions whispered through glowing screens. "Sometimes I feel invisible," she wrote one night, tears in her eyes as Mark slept beside her. David replied within seconds, "That's because the wrong man stopped looking." Guilt pricked her chest, but loneliness whispered louder. Every message was a spark in the dark room of her heart. She began dressing differently when David visited. Brighter colors, careful hair, a touch of perfume. He noticed everything, always with a compliment that lingered like a touch. Mark, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. He trusted both of them completely, proud to see his best friend and his wife getting along. He often said, "It feels like old times, just with more responsibility." But he didn't see the subtle shifts, the way Lena smiled at her phone, the way her laughter sounded different now, the way her eyes avoided his when he asked about her day. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong, that she just needed someone to talk to, someone who understood. Yet at night, lying beside her husband, she began to feel a pull in two directions, between the comfort of loyalty and the thrill of attention. The suspense tightened quietly like a string pulling at her conscience. Every ding of a message made her heart race. Every glance at Mark's trusting face filled her with silent shame. She tried to stop, once even deleting David's number, but loneliness has a way of calling back. One evening, rain tapping against the windows, she sat curled on the couch staring at her phone. A message blinked onto the screen. "You ever wonder if you married the wrong person?" Her breath caught. For a long moment she didn't reply. Then, almost trembling, she typed, "Sometimes, but I tell myself I shouldn't." The reply came instantly, simple, dangerous. "The heart wants what it wants." She read it again and again, tears burning in her eyes, her pulse quickening as though some invisible line had just been crossed. When Mark returned home that night, drenched from the storm, holding takeout and smiling tiredly, she hid her phone under a cushion. He kissed her forehead, his eyes warm. "Rough day," he sighed. "But I missed you." She forced a smile, whispering, "I missed you too," though her heart ached with confusion. They ate quietly, rain whispering against the glass, and when they lay down to sleep she stared into the darkness, hearing his steady breath beside her and wondering why it no longer comforted her. She turned slightly, watching his profile lit faintly by the moonlight, and guilt pressed heavy in her chest. She remembered the vows, the love, the laughter they once shared. But those memories felt distant now, like photos fading with time. What she craved was the spark she once knew, the thrill of being wanted, and David's words echoed through her mind like a siren song. The heart wants what it wants. Outside, thunder rolled softly. Inside, the quiet house felt like a stranger's home. And as Lena closed her eyes, tears slipping silently onto the pillow, she realized she stood on the edge of a choice that would change everything. But for now, she told herself it was harmless, that she could still turn back, that Mark would never know. Yet deep down, she already felt the shift, the invisible fracture in the life they had built, the beginning of a secret that would soon shatter their world. The days that followed grew heavy with unspoken desires and quiet lies, as Lena and David began to find reasons, small at first, innocent in appearance, to meet away from the eyes that trusted them most. Just coffee, they told themselves, sitting across from each other in a quiet cafe near the waterfront, steam curling between them as their hands brushed over mugs, the air charged with something neither dared name. And later it became drives along the coast under the guise of catching up, music playing softly, laughter echoing against the hum of the engine, her eyes shining in a way they hadn't in years. Each meeting blurred the lines a little more, each smile held a secret, each glance a silent confession. David, with his effortless charm and practiced confidence, knew exactly how to feed the emptiness inside her. He spoke in words wrapped like silk, whispering, "You deserve more than just routine, Lena. You deserve to feel alive again." And though her heart trembled with guilt, his voice sank deep into the cracks of her loneliness. She wanted to believe she was still in control, that she could stop whenever she wished, but every moment away from him made her ache for his attention, his compliments, the way he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. Back home, the air between her and Mark began to shift like quiet thunder before a storm. He noticed the difference not in big explosions but in the small silences. The way she avoided eye contact, how her laughter felt forced, how her phone stayed face down on the counter. The dinners grew shorter, the conversations colder. Excuses replaced affection, late replies became routine. When he leaned in to kiss her, she turned her face slightly, murmuring, "I'm tired." Mark told himself she was just stressed, that maybe he was imagining it, yet something deep in his gut whispered that love, when pure, never hides. He began to watch, not with suspicion, but with a heart searching for answers it feared to find. Then one night, as he reached across the bed for his phone, a soft glow from her screen caught his eye. Just a glimpse, a flicker of words before it faded. "Miss you tonight, David." The world seemed to freeze in that fragile moment, the letters burning into his mind, his breath catching in his chest as the truth cracked open inside him. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Instead, he lay still in the darkness, tears gathering silently as Lena slept beside him, her back turned, unaware of the storm brewing inches away. From that night on, Mark carried the weight of invisible heartbreak, choosing to remain silent, to collect truth rather than shatter what remained of his home with accusations. He watched the woman he loved drift further into someone else's orbit, every secret smile like a knife turned in his chest. The tension in the house grew thick, a fragile thread stretched to breaking. Lena felt it too, the shift in Mark's eyes, the quiet sorrow behind his words. But instead of stopping, she buried herself deeper in the illusion that this new passion could fill the emptiness inside her. Guilt gnawed at her when Mark's hand brushed hers at dinner, when he smiled tiredly and said, "You okay?" She'd nod quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and later, alone, she'd stare at her reflection, whispering, "What am I doing?" But the next message from David would erase the doubt. His charm intoxicating, his attention a drug she couldn't resist. Days turned into weeks, each one another step away from the life she once vowed to protect. One rainy afternoon, after a fight about nothing at all, just silence and cold replies, she found herself in David's car again, driving aimlessly along the cliffs overlooking the sea. The world outside was gray, waves crashing violently against the rocks, and inside the car the air pulsed with something unsaid. David reached for her hand, his voice low and certain. "You don't have to pretend anymore. You're not happy with him. You're happiest with me." Her eyes filled with tears as she shook her head weakly, whispering, "I love him, but I don't know who I am anymore." David leaned closer, his breath warm, his words like a spell. "Then let me remind you," and in that trembling heartbeat, reason gave way to desire, and their lips met, soft at first, then hungry, desperate, filled with everything she'd been holding back. The kiss shattered the last barrier between guilt and surrender, sealing a betrayal that could never be undone. Far away, Mark sat at the kitchen table staring at the wedding photo on the wall, the laughter, the promises, the love he thought was unbreakable. And though no one saw it, a single tear slid down his cheek, silent and heavy, carrying the weight of a love betrayed. He didn't need proof anymore. The truth lived in the silence, in the distance, in the way her eyes no longer searched for his. That night, as she returned home smelling faintly of rain and perfume that wasn't hers, Mark looked at her and knew. He said nothing, just a quiet nod, a hollow smile, and turned away. In the darkness of their shared home, one heart broke quietly while another drowned in guilt, and the walls that once held laughter now echoed with secrets too heavy to bear. The temptation had become the sin, and there was no turning back. The days turned colder, not in weather but in spirit, as Mark carried the truth like a stone in his chest, heavy and unspoken, watching from the corners of silence as the love he once trusted slipped through the cracks of deceit. He no longer asked questions, no longer searched for excuses. Instead, he waited, calmly, quietly, for the moment when truth would speak for itself. And when that day finally came, it arrived wrapped in stillness. Mark sent a message to David, casual, friendly, the kind a man sends to an old friend. "Come over for dinner. It's been too long." The reply was swift, confident, unsuspecting. Lena, caught between guilt and fear, asked softly, "You're inviting him?" And Mark simply nodded, his eyes unreadable, his voice steady. "It's time we all sat together." That evening, the house felt different. Too quiet, too careful. Candles flickered across the dining table, plates set perfectly, the smell of roasted chicken filling the air like a cruel disguise for what was about to unfold. David arrived with his familiar charm, smiling as if nothing were wrong, greeting Lena with a warmth that made her heart tremble, and shaking Mark's hand with practiced ease. The dinner began politely. Small talk and stories, laughter forced like brittle glass. But beneath the surface, Mark's eyes burned with pain held behind calm composure, every smile hiding the storm within. He listened, nodded, spoke softly, each word deliberate, his gaze moving between the two people who had torn his world apart. And then, just as the plates were cleared and the silence thickened, Mark reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone with slow precision. Without a word, he tapped the screen. A voice filled the room. Lena's soft laughter, David's whispered tone, the unmistakable intimacy of stolen moments. The air froze. The candlelight seemed to flicker slower, time stretching into a painful eternity. Lena's fork slipped from her trembling hand, clattering against the plate as her face drained of color. David's smile vanished, replaced by a flicker of shock, then defiance. Mark's voice, low and controlled, cut through the silence. "You said you missed him tonight." His eyes, glistening but steady, met Lena's as he continued, reading aloud the messages, the confessions, the longing, the betrayal woven into words that once lived in secret. The room turned into a graveyard of trust. No one moved. No one breathed. Lena's tears began to fall, slow and heavy, splashing onto the tablecloth like drops of regret. David leaned back, exhaling, trying to hide behind arrogance. "Mark, it just happened," he muttered, his tone half excuse, half indifference. "We didn't mean for it to go this far." The words sliced through the air like knives. Lena sobbed, hands trembling as she tried to speak. I was lonely. You were always gone. I didn't want to." Her voice cracked, collapsing under the weight of her own choices. Mark stared at her, eyes hollow, face pale, the ache in his chest deeper than anger could ever reach. He said nothing, because what words could rebuild a love that had been traded for whispers and lies? The silence became unbearable, thick with shame and sorrow. Lena reached for him, whispering his name like a plea, but Mark stepped back, tears filling his eyes, his voice breaking as he finally whispered, "You broke something that can't be fixed." Then he turned. No shouting, no final goodbye, just the quiet sound of footsteps across the floor, the soft creak of the door opening, and the cold night swallowing him whole. Behind him, the house remained still. Lena collapsed in tears at the table, David frozen in guilt and cowardice, and the candles flickering against walls that had once held laughter, now echoing only with the silence of love betrayed. Outside, under the dim streetlight, Mark stood for a moment staring at the sky, his breath trembling, his heart shattered beyond repair. No music played, yet the world itself seemed to hum a mournful tune. The months drifted by like slow-moving clouds after a violent storm, carrying with them the broken pieces of a life once filled with laughter and dreams. Seasons changed, but the ache remained, softer now, yet constant, like a distant echo that never fully fades. The house that had once been a home now stood silent and hollow, a monument to promises shattered and love betrayed. Its walls remembered everything, the laughter, the arguments, the midnight whispers, and the final silence that ended it all. Mark had walked away not out of anger, but because staying meant dying a little more each day. He left behind the pain, the betrayal, and the fragments of a trust that could never be pieced together again. In his new apartment across town, small, quiet, and filled with sunlight, Mark began to rebuild himself from the ashes. He woke before dawn, tied his shoes, and went to the gym where the clinking of weights and the rhythm of his breath became a new language of healing. Every drop of sweat carried away a piece of sorrow. Every repetition whispered, "You're still here. You're still strong." After months of sleepless nights and endless questions, he began therapy, learning to untangle the storm inside his heart. The therapist's words helped him see that forgiveness was not weakness, that closure was something built, not begged for. Mark took a new job, one with fewer hours and more meaning, and found solace in quiet routines, books, long walks, sunsets. The ache didn't disappear, but it softened, becoming like an old scar. Visible, yes, but no longer bleeding. He was learning to live again, not as the man who lost everything, but as one who had survived. Meanwhile, Lena lived in the haunting hollow of regret. David, once the center of her secret passion, vanished soon after their truth was exposed. His promises as fragile as the lies he told. He left her without a word, proving that his love had been nothing but a mirror for her loneliness. Alone now, Lena faced the ruins of the life she had burned down. Days turned to nights in silence. She wandered through the empty rooms of the house, touching the walls as if they might forgive her. The kitchen smelled of nothing but dust. The living room echoed only her own sobs. Every photo, every memory became a knife. She tried to make amends in the only way she knew, through words she could barely write. Letter after letter filled with trembling apologies, wet with tears, soaked in guilt. I don't ask for forgiveness, only for you to know I regret every moment I hurt you. Some she kept hidden in drawers. A few she mailed. The envelopes returned unopened, stamped with silence. It was a pain worse than anger, because it meant he had truly moved on. Still, she couldn't let go. Some nights, she would drive to his new apartment and sit in her car beneath the streetlight, staring up at his window, whispering into the darkness. I'm sorry, Mark. I'm so sorry. One evening, when the ache became too heavy, she gathered her courage and went to his door. Her hands shook as she clutched a letter to her chest. When Mark opened the door, he stood tall, calm, changed. A man no longer broken, but distant, peaceful. His eyes held kindness, but also a wall she could never cross again. Her voice cracked as she whispered, I'm sorry. I ruined everything. Tears streamed down her face, words tumbling out like prayers to a God who wouldn't answer. Mark looked at her for a long moment, the silence thick with everything they once were, then simply said, softly, I know. And with a gentle nod, he closed the door, not in hatred but in acceptance. It was the sound of finality, of a chapter closing forever. The old house became her prison. Every room whispered her mistakes. The kitchen where they cooked together mocked her with its emptiness. The bed where they once shared dreams felt colder than stone. One rainy afternoon, Lena sat by the window, a framed photo trembling in her hands, her and Mark on their wedding day, eyes bright, smiles pure, hearts untouched by lies. Her fingers traced his face through the glass as raindrops blurred her reflection. In that reflection, she saw not the woman she once was, but a stranger, someone who traded truth for illusion, love for attention. Her voice, broken and trembling, spilled into the silence. I lost a man who loved me truly, for someone who never cared. The confession hung in the air, unanswered, and for the first time, she understood that regret is the heaviest chain of all. Across town, as the evening sun bled gold across the horizon, Mark sat alone on a park bench, the same park where he once planned their future. He watched children chase each other through the grass, couples laughing, hands intertwined. The world still turned, love still bloomed, life still moved forward. And in that moment, he realized he had too.
The pain would never vanish completely, but it no longer owned him. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but to set himself free. Forgiveness, he learned, was an act of courage, but trust, once shattered, could never be rebuilt in its old shape. He looked at the sunset, the sky painted in hues of sorrow and hope, and whispered into the fading light, forgiveness is possible. But trust, once broken, never heals the same. The scene fades slowly into darkness. Soft piano music begins, gentle, sorrowful, beautiful. The screen turns black. White words appear like a voice from the soul. Some mistakes echo forever. Moral: true love can survive distance, pain, even time, but not deceit. Once trust is broken, love may forgive, but it never forgets. Thank you for watching. Remember, love deserves honesty. Silence can destroy what words might save. Subscribe for more emotional stories that remind us. Hearts may break, but lessons remain. The music fades. Silence takes over. The story ends, but its echo lingers.